while, but I wanted to upgrade our accounting systems. And so I have this proposal here that lays out what my original goal was, basically to get us set up on a crypto subledger. The one that we went with was Cryptio, and then also integrating that with QuickBooks or QBO, which is a really common accounting system. And so the impetus for this was actually when I was going through and putting together our financials for 2021. And so we had to do this for tax purposes. Our tax accountants needed some sort of financial statement so they could base our tax liability off of. And so I did it all in Manu. So this is what we put together for 2021. And this is pretty much me going to different wallets on Etherscan, downloading activity, and trying to parse it and put it into some sort of profit and loss statement. And so when I was going through this process, I just noticed like how manual it was. I wasn't quite sure if the pricing was actually correct. And so through this, I realized, okay, we need to actually get set up on a better system and a more like proper accounting system like QuickBooks. And so this is kind of where we started here. Just imagine Etherscan downloading activity off of wallets there.
Are you showing the correct screen? I think you're showing the Discord screen.
Oh, it's not. Oh, it's weird. Okay, let's try again. Thanks for letting me know. Okay. Okay, I think you should be seeing it now, right? 2021 P&L. Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So this is kind of where we started, just looking at all of our revenue that we received to all of our different wallets, and then trying to figure out how much we actually paid builders, but it was a really scrappy, sort of messy system. And so starting in May, I had a proposal here, and the goal was really just to put together a more robust accounting system and accounting processes. And so just wanted to show you, I guess, the process that goes into making this happen. And so one thing I'm really excited about is that we are onboarded onto Cryptio, which I mentioned is a crypto subledger, but just think of a crypto subledger as just a repository of all of our different transactions that come from all of our different safes. And so this is pretty much what it looks like here. You can see these are all our transactions that have been syncing through. And luckily, since dOrg operates mostly on Ethereum, a little bit on Polygon, those are supported blockchains on Cryptio and most other subledgers. And so I can just plug in a wallet address. And if I go over to Imports tab here, you can just put in a wallet address, name it, and then it starts syncing in all of your activity, which is really awesome. And so from there, it's just a matter of looking at the transactions that are coming in, identifying the parties that tokens are either going to or coming from, and then labeling the different types of activity. And so as you all know, most of the activity we have on dOrg, we have client projects, we get paid to our different safes, and then the builders get paid from those safes, and then a margin, 10%, goes back to the main dOrg safe. And so these are those transactions that you're basically saying, like, for example, Opolis, actually, let's go here. This is Opolis, like paying out transactions to a bunch of the builders. So you can see everyone's labeled as well, so I know where it's coming from. And you can also see Opolis sending tokens back to the treasury. So let me go over to some earlier pages here. The ones for October still need to actually be pulled together. But you can see here, there's builder payments, and we have data going back all the way from 2019 as well, because we first started off on DAO and then we went through a few iterations of that, and then we moved to Ethereum mainnet in July 2021, which is when our new wallet system or new wallet structure kind of started. And so one caveat is we still need to pull in some DAO data because Cryptio doesn't currently support Gnosis yet, like the Gnosis chain. So still waiting on some data to pull in, but at least all the stuff for 2021, we have most of that in there, which is really awesome. And so this is sort of one aspect of it. Happy to take or do like more of a deep dive and if anyone has any questions later. But just imagine Cryptio, this is where all of our crypto transactions are living. And so I just want to switch gears to QuickBooks real quickly. So you're probably familiar with QuickBooks. It's like the most used ERP system or just like accounting ledger. And so before we had a QuickBooks, but it wasn't really set up at all. And so I went ahead and created our QuickBooks account. And then you can also see in accounting, there's something called chart of accounts. And so this is where all of our different activity gets mapped to. And so I got to go through a really cool experience of creating accounts for dOrg and sort of seeing like what business activity do we really have and what account should be mapped to. So you can see we have tax expense, of course. We have expenses for a token bonus. We have swarm expenses, fund initiatives, retreat. And so this is pretty much where our our accounting activity gets mapped to, and it's very specific to dOrg, right? Like when you first open a QuickBooks account, it gives you just a whole slew of, like general accounts, but you really have to tailor them to the activity of your business. And so there's things like internal role wages or builder wages, and then I split it out by token. So you can see like by token, how much we're spending, and also on the income side, how much income we're earning per different token. And so it's pretty cool. If you're interested in getting a download of this so you can see, just let me know. But this was kind of the first step in actually setting up our accounting system, was putting together a chart of accounts. And so one other system that was really important for this is Gilded. So if you're a PM or done anything like related to invoicing on projects, you've probably used Gilded before. And this is where we do all of our invoicing. And so you can see some of the more recent ones here. We have our project, how much we invoiced, date created, etc. And then we can also go in and tell when it's paid. And so the main methodology for like sort of recognizing revenue for dOrg is all based on the invoice, right? Because under accrual accounting, which we'll get into in a bit, you can recognize revenue once you've actually like done the work, essentially. And so for dOrg, it's pretty much when we like send the invoice, that's like the point of revenue recognition. And so at least on the revenue side, it all kind of starts with the invoice that we send out to the client, regardless of when it's been paid. So you can see all the different invoices we have here. And then what I went ahead and did is translated that to, it's a spreadsheet, and this main spreadsheet here, which I think, let's see, yeah, anyone with dOrg can access this, but this is the worksheet basically for all the different invoices and how we calculate our revenue. And so one thing that I would love to get into as well, this is more on the expense side. And so again, revenue, it goes to accounts receivable when we first send the invoice. That's just going to be the amount that we invoice. But then dOrg is really interesting because 80% of whatever the client pays us is supposed to go to the builders, 10% goes to the sourcing person, and then the remaining 10%, which is dOrg's margin, goes back to the treasury. And so this way I was able to calculate, what should we actually book as an expense for builders? What should we actually book for the sourcing fees? And so I was able to do that on an invoice by invoice level. And so for this invoice for Deck Shop, for example, we invoiced them for $3,900, and then out of that, $3,120 is going to builders, $390 is going to sourcing, and then the other $390 is assumed to be going to the treasury. And so there are all this data here, which really just comes from the invoices. This is actually the backbone for all the different journal entries that go into our accounting system. And so I can probably show you an example here. Let's see, if we go back to the chart of accounts here and just pull up an example journal entry. Let's see which one this is. This is actually synced over from Crypto, but we'll get to that in a second. But this is kind of like the first order of journal entries that we put together, is just the revenue, and then at the same time, like what expense have we actually incurred, which goes into QBO. And so then the next part really is Crypto that comes in. And so again, as I mentioned, transactions are just syncing in. And so the cool part is that Crypto actually talks to QuickBooks. These two things are connected. And so if I see, let's say like a payment coming in from a client, let's pick a good one here. Let's see. Yeah, we've got a lot of spam tokens. Okay, but in this case, let's say Doing Good, for example, paid us $390 USDC. And so then I'm able to go in and label that transaction and say, this is a client payment, this goes to, and this is USDC. And so this label here is what enables us to connect Crypto over to QuickBooks. And so QuickBooks knows, okay, like this is a client payment, I should book it to this revenue account for USDC. And so that's kind of the powerful part about this, is that I can even download the invoice that this applies to and upload it here. Does someone have a question? Okay, sorry, I thought I heard someone. But yeah, I can upload the invoice, and then you can just basically push the transaction out to QuickBooks, and you can open up the journal entry right here, which is really cool. So in this example, the client's paying us, so we're getting an increase in tokens, and then it's decreasing what's called like accounts receivable, which is another account that we use to denominate a client that owes us money. And so that's kind of the basis for how all of our financials come together. So whenever we send an invoice, that's when the client technically owes us. So we set up accounts receivable, and then we, on the other hand, we owe our builders a certain amount, and so we incur that expense. And so I wanted to go through this because it just gives you more of a foundation for how we actually created these accrual-based financial statements And this is different from the cash flows that we're going to get into a little bit later. And so accrual accounting is all about like when do we actually like earn the revenue and when do we actually incur the expense for whatever item it might be. And so all based on that, if you're actually interested in learning more, I wrote an article here about why I think we need accrual accounting for DAOs. I think it's really important to see, like it's really good for high level strategic thinking and planning. Cash flows are really great for more day-to-day operational things, like do we have enough tokens in our budget to pay for like Swarm or internal roles. But accrual, again, is just really good for decision making, like how much revenue are we actually bringing in from our projects? And also, are we collecting on that revenue, or do we have a lot of invoices that are outstanding? And so that's kind of just the context there. And I also want to show you where you can actually access these financials. I posted this link earlier, but in this folder here, which everyone should have access to, I pulled down all of the reports that I got out of QuickBooks. And so the two main ones that I pulled down were our profit and loss statement, also called like an income statement, and then our balance sheet. And let me just show you in QuickBooks, it's really easy to run these reports. Like if I just wanted, let's see, January's profit and loss statement, you can just put that in. And so January, for example, you can see this is all the income that we've earned on a project level. And so this means we've invoiced the client. And so in DAI, for example, we are technically owed $54,000 like worth of DAI. And the cool part is you can drill in. So I can click this and see, okay, this is actually Polyrat paying us, and this is Ethereum Foundation paying us. These two are really interesting because we don't really do invoices for these yet. So this is just us actually getting paid in DAI. And so that's not really on an accrual basis. But then there's other ones like here for USDC where it's revenue for this particular invoice. Let's see, for a Gnosis invoice. This invoice was sent for $5,000. So we're booking it as revenue, and that's going to go into January's bucket, even if it was paid, let's say, in February or in March. And so that's all of our top line. And then our expenses, again, these are just what we owe builders, right? So this should be roughly around like 80% of whatever the project income we have for the month is. And so that's kind of like a good rule of thumb that I went through to make sure the numbers look correct. And then we have other expenses underneath that. I put sourcing fee in here. General business expenses, so things, like our QuickBooks account, iPostal, Netlify, Heroku, everything like that is going to get pulled into this bucket here. And then we also have our ops expenses, right? Like internal roles, we have our Swarm expense. And then also one-off things like legal and accounting services, like when we paid for Polywrap. Was it Polywrap? We paid for a tax preparer, like that's going to go into this bucket as well. And then tax liability that we owe on the state level, and then also, as you can see here, the federal level. And so I think this is a really cool view. It's not just looking at our treasury, it's kind of looking at like literally everything. And this is how DAO or how dOrg is operating as a company, almost like as a DAO. And these are just kind of like the high level what's actually happening and coming in and out of our different safes. And so you can see again all of these here. I just pulled them down to different spreadsheets here, and then we can also look at the balance sheet, which is pretty cool. This is showing like how much does dOrg like actually have, like how many assets do we own, how much do we owe other people, which is called liability, and then like what equity do we have, which is basically how much are we actually earning. And so you can see here at the end of January we had like assets around 500K, and let's see September, I think that was the last one I did. Let's open up this one. You can see assets are a little bit lower at 461. And again, this balance sheet is representing everything. This is not just our ETH treasury. This is all the assets we have across all of our project safes, all of our different activity. Let's say a client paid us to one of our project safes, but the tokens are still in there, like as of month end or whatever. It's going to get counted in here, even though it's not going to show up in our main like ETH treasury. Okay, so that's sort of what the whole project was intended to do. Get dOrg accrual-based financial statements. And it's really great because we can also use this for taxation purposes. We can actually run a report in Cryptio that just gives us our gains and losses. And I know that was a big pain point last year, was trying to figure out any gains and losses that we have and things like that. And you can just run it. It's just a report that you can now run in Cryptio, which is really cool. And so that's kind of the accrual part of it. I think it's really important that we have these types of reporting in case, we get audited, we need it, not that we're going to have funding or other investors, but those are generally things that you need it for. So just in the case that we want to do that later on, at least we have that optionality now, which is really cool. And so that's the accrual-based part of it. That's sort of how the whole system works. You have Crypto, you have QBO, we have Gilded. We're in the process of switching this over to Parallax, which is another crypto invoicing system that actually connects to QuickBooks, which is really cool. But for now, still on Gilded. And then again, you can find all this information in this financials folder here. And so that's the first part. The second part I wanted to get into is just our straight up cash flows. And so you might be wondering, well, what's the difference between our cash flows and all this like financial stuff that you were just talking about? And so cash flows are basically what is hitting our treasury, like what's coming into our treasury and what is leaving our treasury. And I'm not looking at, what revenue did we actually earn, even though client might have not paid us yet. I'm not looking at like what expense did we incur, even though we haven't like paid it out to a builder yet. I'm looking at what actually has like hit our treasury in terms of tokens and what have we actually paid out from it. And again, you can actually get all this stuff from Crypto because Crypto, that's what it's doing. It's not on an accrual basis. It's just pulling our transactions as they're happening on chain. So anything you see here, like when Obelisk sent us 1.9 or 1,875 USDC, that actually happened, and they sent it on October 13th. And so it's pretty much what the view that we're taking, and props to Aisha for putting all this together. It's been really helpful. And so this is actually much easier than doing it on an accrual basis because I'm not concerned about like if we receive tokens, when did we actually like earn that revenue versus when did they pay it out. I can just look at when did they actually pay us, and that's considered an inflow. And so all we have to do is just download a Crypto report here, do a couple of pivot tables, and then you can kind of see here, the cash flows or the cash flows perspective across all the different months that we have here. And so again, this view will come like really in handy when it comes to tax time, because historically we've been paying taxes on a cash basis instead of on an accrual basis. And so we can just kind of look to Crypto and do the reports that they run for taxes, which is really going to cut down the time, at least for 2022 taxes. And so definitely recommend checking this link out in more detail. And so like in January, for example, we had cash flows of 181K hit our wallets. And this view here that you're seeing here, this is all of our all saves, not just our like treasury safe only. These are all of our different project wallets. And then we had outflows in January of like 180K, leaving us fairly net positive. But you can see here how that's sort of changed over month. And a lot of it's very variable. It depends on like how much clients are actually paying us. Are we prompt with paying out our builders? Because if we're not, then it's not going to show up as an outflow. How much are we spending on expenses? Maybe we had a funded initiative for the month that causes like a bigger outflow. So the cash flows do tend to be a lot lumpier because it's all a timing thing. I think a good example, we had like the warp settlement that happened. I forget what month, but it showed up as like a massive inflow to our treasury safe actually. So that really increased our outflows. And at the same time, we like paid out to builders, so that really increased. Or the first one increased our inflows, and when we paid out to builders, that really increased our outflows as well. So then that made it kind of an abnormal month compared to maybe a more average month. And so, yeah, but I really recommend looking at this because there's also different metrics here. Like, out of the active projects that we have, what's our average client payment per project, which I think is a good metric to know. Is that number hopefully increasing or is it decreasing? So we need to do more BD effort there. And then also we look at the builder payments. And so we look at how many active builders we have and then figure out like what's the average payment that any particular builder like earned for the month. And so ideally that number will also be increasing. And so I'm not going to go through all these other tabs here. They just have more data. Just recommend looking at the overview tab. And then one tab that I'm really excited about is now looking at our treasury safe. And so just a context set again. So the financials that we looked at, the ones that look like this, like our profit and loss sheet or our balance sheet, these are like high level accrual basis, right? What did everything in our treasury or everything across all the safes we own, like how much did they earn? That's on an accrual basis. Then we go one level down, which is looking at the inflows and outflows of all of our safes, but it's on a cash basis, right? So what actually is hitting our safes and what are we actually sending out? So it's kind of the second level. Now the third level is looking at our actual treasury safe. So this is one safe and it's our main treasury. I can go ahead and open it up here. But this is where when project safes earn or they get tokens, right? They remit 10% back to this main treasury, and this is what pays for things like my role, like internal roles or swarms or funding initiatives or any expenses that we have like Slack. That's all coming out of this main safe here called our treasury safe. So right now we have around 103K that's actually in our balance, but what we can do is look at this on a more fine detail. So that's exactly what this tab does here. And this is probably the one that's of most concern to builders here, because this is actually more day-to-day, more operational, like how much money do we actually have left to spend? So probably the most important part. And so what you can see here, we break it down kind of like we do for all the other safes, but we look at what are our inflows and then what are our outflows. And this is pure cash basis, like what's just happening on chain. And so I think January here, this is a great example. And so we had 24K that was sent into our treasury. This is just from projects that are sending back their 10% to the main treasury. But we actually had no payouts because all of our expenses that we incurred in January were actually paid in February. So they're landing in the February bucket. Expenses that we incurred in February are then landing, or they're paid out basically in March, so they're landing in the March bucket. And so at least on the expense side was always kind of like a 1 month lag here. And like the January expenses, again, paid out in February. In December, we ended up paying them out, I think on like December 29th, just to get it all done for the year. But that's why there was no outflows, because we didn't send anything out of our treasury in January. And so of course that's going to look really good, right? It's like net cash flows are super positive, but just because it's a timing delay, it's a timing difference. And so just looking at the top line here, I would definitely look at the treasury, change in treasury flows. You can see it's variable. It depends based on when, it's all kind of at the whim of when these different project safes send back their 10% to us. And so it's kind of bumpy. Like some months were really negative. Other months, like this month was like 308% because we had, and this was probably due to Polywrap sending, or like getting like a big payment and sending our 10% back. But some months are really negative. And so this is definitely a lot more variable. But I think the part that's cool to look at is our expenses here. You can see how we split out our different expenses. Like Swarm has been steadily decreasing. As you'll see, funding initiatives are a bit lumpy depending on when we actually have a funding initiative, like the application tool, Operation Conway. I know there's like a sourcing push right now. And so that's lumpy, but you can see that has been, steadily increasing. Internal roles, you can see it's also been increasing as we're, adding people or increasing rates. SaaS expenses tends to be generally, it is a little lumpy depending on, what tools we're currently using. Like paying for crypto was around 3K, so that went into one of these buckets here. And other things like ETH reimbursement. So if you pay for gas, we'll reimburse you. Token bonus, when Ori and I pay for taxes, that is like a huge expense that popped up here. But that's just like a once a year kind of thing. So that's how you get our outflows. And again, it's the same sort of thing here. How does this actually change? As you can see, this is still fairly lumpy because it really just depends on like what was actually sent out during a given month. And you can have big spikes like the warp payout, for example, which did happen to flow from our treasury safe. And so that really impacted the amount that we actually sent out. At the end here, you get the net cash flows, so inflows minus total outflows. And you can see we have been pretty red the last couple of months, so that's probably a good indicator that maybe we should hold the brakes a little bit on spending, or at least like put more thought into those items that we are spending money on. And then you can also look at the treasury balance here. Like how has this changed over time? So we started the month off with, or started the year with 154K. Now we're at 103K. So, the decrease has been around like around 50K. And so you can also see this in a graphical representation here. One tab that I'm also super stoked about, and I think this one will be really helpful, especially if you're thinking about doing a funded initiative or a proposal, it really just pulls in what's our current value of the dOrg treasury, just according to the different stable coins that we have. And these are all pulling from Etherscan API, so it's super current. This is what we have here. Let me actually refresh those. And then let's say you want to propose a funding initiative. The way that it works, they can put in like what's the cost per month, how many months does the initiative cover, and then you get to a total cost here. So there was one that was recently like 25K, so I just put in those parameters here. And then it spits out kind of like an estimate of if we did incur this expense, if it did pass the process and we spent this amount of money, like how much would our treasury be after this cost was absorbed. And so in this case, if we spent 25K in our treasury, that's going to decrease it quite a bit. And so the way this formula works, I'm just taking what our current treasury is and minus the total cost, and then I'm adding our average margin, which is what this formula is doing. So on average, how much revenue have we added per month? And then subtracting out on average, how much have we spent per month out of the treasury? And so even with the margin included for the number of months that the initiative covers, in this case, if we spent 25K, that would decrease our treasury by an estimated 30%, which seems super high. So for any funded proposals, we're really targeting a decrease of no more than 10%, because that seems reasonable, where 30% seems really high to spend on like one proposal, for example. And so I think, this tool will be super helpful. I've gotten a lot of questions on like, how's our treasury doing? Like, how much should I really be spending on this proposal? I think this is a good rule of thumb. We're definitely not trying to set like hard budgets, like you can only spend like X amount per month or per quarter. We more want to present the data so that you can make an informed decision yourself based on this data here and the different parameters that we've set. Okay, so that was a lot of talking. I'm going to stop there to see if there's any questions at all about the cash flows or about the accrual-based financial statements. So if you have any questions, please ask away. No questions?
Yeah, a little bit. First, I want to say congratulations. It's an amazing work that you have done. Okay, one more time. I want to see like the flow of the different apps that we use. I understand that it's first crypto, and then with all that information. One question there is that, do you put the tags of all the transactions, or that's kind of like automatically? And also I saw there's some IDs from, for example, cost has, I think it's 5,000, income is 4,000. That's something that you do as well, or this application does it? And a simple, flow, because you went like with the detail and explaining every detail of each application, but just a simple flow of first use this app, then this one, and then this one. And I know
Sure.
Jill did this for invoicing.
Yeah, can definitely do that. So the first, I think you asked about the codes. I think, were you talking about the screen here? Let me get this up. The chart of accounts that has the different numbers here?
Exactly. And if it's the same for each application.
Yeah, so I can actually probably just start here, because this whole project kind of started like on the screen here. In order to figure out the accounting for activity, I had to create separate accounts that map to all of our different activity. And so what you see here, I created these. Usually in accounting, this is called the chart of accounts, and is usually codes that represent each type of item, like on a balance sheet or a financial statement. And so, for example, and it tells you what type. So anything that's an expense is coded. It usually starts with a 5 or a 6. And so these are all of our different expenses. These are going to hit our income statement. So if we, pay some money to attend a conference, that's going to go into this marketing expense bucket. And then cost of goods sold, that's also an expense. So it starts with a 5. And then the other important one is income. So all of our income accounts start with a 4. And so that's how that mapping works. And equity usually starts with a 3, and then we get into our balance sheet accounts, like liability, so things that we owe other people, usually starts with a 2, and then assets, so things that we own, usually start with a 1. And so I just sort of followed that convention that most other chart of accounts have. Something that's also relevant is that, yes, so this chart of accounts here, it gets pulled into Cryptio. And so Cryptio knows, you'll see those integrations and then a chart of accounts tab. And so let me actually go back. Quarter chart of accounts. This is our chart of accounts that you'll see like in the books here. And so that's the cool part about Cryptio, is that it already knows like what our accounting setup is. And so that when transactions are coming through, I can just basically like map it to one of these accounts here. And so in that way, like they are linked. And so, but high level, I start off with a chart of accounts. The next part is Cryptio. That's where I put in all the different wallet addresses, and that's just pulling in all of our different activity. And so that's sort of like step 2. Step 3 is integrating like QBO, so QuickBooks, with Cryptio. And so there's kind of like two parts that work in QuickBooks. And so the first part is more related to like Gilded. So let's say we send out an invoice to a client, then I'm going to manually go in QuickBooks and set up, basically mimic that transaction because Gilded doesn't talk to QuickBooks. And so if we invoice Starkware for $750, I'm going to go in QuickBooks and create a journal entry that's like, we earned revenue for Starkware. So I'm going to increase our revenue account and then increase our accounts receivable account. And so it's kind of like a manual entry that happens. But then when I actually see the client pay us, let's say Starkware does pay the 750 USDC, that's going to come through Cryptio because this is happening on chain. And then I'm going to push that transaction. So I'm going to sync it into QuickBooks, which it basically decreases the receivable and then increases the asset that we actually received. So in that example, our receivable would go down by 750, and then our USDC account, our USDC balance would increase by 750. And so, yeah, so you see the process is like kind of manual, but it starts with chart of accounts, then Cryptio comes in, and then Cryptio talks to QuickBooks, and then the cycle's finished. Does that help?
Yes, perfect, amazing.
Okay.
One last question is now kind of related to our financing, but have you done like any research on collateralized, under collateralized loans or DAOs?
I think I did like one time. I was looking to Maple or something like that, so I was trying to see like maybe we could get a loan using the treasury that we have. But I think I just looked into it. I think we decided we didn't really need a loan because our treasury like at that time could support the activity we wanted. But definitely open to exploring that more, especially as you can see like our cash flows haven't been like super strong with the downturn, and so maybe a loan's not a bad thing to look into, especially if we're trying to support higher levels of activity. Yeah, if I find that doc, I think I put it in the notes doc. I can send that over to you. But yeah, I definitely did look at it, and I think dOrg would probably be a good candidate for something like that.
Perfect. No, and even if we don't take a loan, just following those projects to see how they do it, or how they have done it the past year. And some examples could be nice. And then after, I don't know, at some point we can decide if that's a road that we can take.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. Actually, I can take a note of that to look into that because I think it's kind of cool. Anyways, like we have the treasury to at least like support the loan. So yeah, let me take a note of that. Awesome. Any other questions?
Thank you. This was an amazing presentation, and it was really well put together. So it at least gave me a view into parts of the DAO that I don't really know. So that was great. But it's not really a question, but more of a comment or yeah. I was thinking that last place where you showed how a funded initiative would impact the treasury. I think maybe people that are voting on proposals are not really like they don't know that part. They just see what's the total, and then they just think, is this good or not? So perhaps we should have that part of a requirement for a funded proposal, like including that computation, so that the people can actually see how it will impact the treasury directly, and when they vote. Maybe that would be a good thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that'd be good to know like how much it actually costs. Like in this example, like say the treasury or like the proposal will cost 25K, but then that also comes with like a 30% decrease in our treasury, and then people can make an example or make a decision based on that. So yeah, I totally agree on that. Also open to like this formula is very simple here, and so this is kind of like V1. If anyone has any like ideas or feedback for how to kind of improve this or like other parameters you think should be included, let me know. This is more meant to be just like a quick estimate, like how much will this affect our treasury. So definitely open to feedback on this too, though.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Anything else?
Mackenzie, hi. So yeah, first of all, thank you for your amazing work. This was like really, really insightful onto like the tier treasury, and yeah, answering Oscar, we can make sure to add that on our handbook to kind of like add it on our procedure before voting for an funded initiative. And then I have also like a question for you because I'm not familiar with what was like the ROP payout, and yeah, if you could give me like just 5 cents about it, because I really didn't know like what was the meaning of that.
Or what did you say? What
The wrap payout. So when you were showing the DAO treasury, there was like a month. I think it was on July.
Oh,
June. Yeah, that.
this one. Yeah. So there's actually a client project that I don't know what year this even applied to, but it was a disputed payout essentially, and so we got final settlement on it in June, and so we actually got a really big payout. So you see here, like the inflows also increased by like a crazy amount, and so this is the client paying us. I want to say it was like 80K. Actually, let me find it for you. Yeah, so the client, as part of this disputed settlement, paid us 85K, but they paid it directly to our main treasury. They didn't pay it to like the Warp wallet. I think we had like a different wallet architecture back then. I think it was still like DAO Stack or something like that. So they just paid us 85K straight to our safe. And then because this was a client project, we owed amounts to builders. And so that amount that we owed to builders was 59K. And I think that also includes like the sourcing fee. And all the numbers for that are here. So you can see like the settlement basically. They paid us 85K, margin, sourcing, and then the builder payouts. So that was kind of like a one-off thing though, related to like a disputed project.
Gotcha. Because thank you for the response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other big one you'll see here is just taxes, and so this is our 2021 tax liability. And basically, like Ori covered some of it, I covered some. We just paid it out of like our personal accounts, but then the treasury reimbursed us for that in April, and so that's what that large expense is. So you'll probably see like another like large expense next year around the same time, just to pay for like our 2022 taxes. So just heads up on that. Oh, and also this part here, which you might be wondering about rank cards. So this is our prepaid debit crypto card, or prepaid crypto debit card, which is really awesome. And so these aren't like straight outflows, like even though we're sending it into a separate account, this is more like an internal transfer. It's separate from like our main ETH treasury. But basically this is going to like another account that we own, and then we use this account, our rank cards account, to pay, for different SaaS expenses. So like we use Google, or we pay for Google using rank cards, like a lot of our other SaaS expenses. So these are more like internal transfers versus pure outflows. Okay, cool. I'm going to send out these links, both to this one and then all of our financials as well in the general channel. If at any time you have any other questions or suggestions, please just feel free to message me. And hopefully these are helpful numbers and helpful tools that will help us make better decisions in the DAO. So awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Mackenzie. That was really great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Diego, do you stay on as well so we can do the credit card thing?
Yeah, do you want to stay here?
Actually, let's meet in the private channel, because I'll be giving you the credit card information. So yeah, I'll just call you.
Mama, que t'he trucat però no m'agafes el telèfon. Que vaig molt liada i ara tinc com 2 hores de la Paloma i després hauré de continuar fent feina perquè avui m'he posat a fer feina quasi que fa 1 hora perquè al matí no he fet res i després he anat al dentista perquè se m'avuia l'implant. Que això, que si et va bé que vingui demà a dormir, que m'ho vindrà millor. I el truco després que així te faig un resumen ràpid de Sevilla, ha sigut molt guai.